Welcome to the Business End of Agility podcast, hosted by New Zealand's Business Agility Meetup community. We're here to bring you real-world stories from innovative organisations and forward-thinking leaders around the globe. We're going to explore all facets of business agility, from adaptive leadership and evolving company cultures to emerging ways of working, processes and technologies. I'm your host for the session, Bianca, and thank you for joining us. So, you've embraced that AI is here, and perhaps you've even done some experiments and had a few exciting productivity gains. But how do you incorporate AI into the very fabric of your business? And how are functions like marketing leveraging AI? What should you be incorporating in your business strategy? And how will AI change the future skills of your workforce? These are some great questions, and I've got an exciting panel for us today to help me answer those. We have Andy Cooper, avid researcher, user, and speaker on AI, Justin Kabbani, expert AI coach and consultant and former advertising CEO, and Laura Powers, CEO at the Global Business Agility Institute. Welcome, everyone, to today's episode.
Hello, welcome.
Back. Yeah, nice to be here. Yeah.
I'm going to start off with helping everyone to get to know you a little bit more. So I'm going to start with you, Andy, and then I'll get you to pass the mic to somebody else in the panel. But what's your latest AI thing that sparked your interest? What sparked your interest in the world of AI currently?
There's a lot going on, as usual. I think that's what keeps us interesting, is that every week there seems to be a new release or new this or that. So there's a lot in different areas, depending which tools you are. In my organization, I'm sort of, as I probably mentioned last time, sort of running what we call the AI acceleration team. So we're looking at rolling AI across the organization and working across the business, looking at different uses of it and therefore different tools. Predominantly we use Claude and ChatGPT, the enterprise versions of those, and even they are changing frequently. A product that we have been playing around with that I find quite intriguing is a product called Notebook LLM, which from Google, and that's in education, which is our field. So we are a large training organization doing training for like 15,000 students across predominantly New Zealand, but around the world. Finding Notebook LLM quite intriguing for its ability to be able to sort of take in information and then provide summaries and learning tools, including the podcast generator, which has just been improved in the last couple of weeks to enable you to sort of specify what you want it to cover. But what it does is quite amazing in terms of the quality that it, and we're finding that really good, and I find it useful for myself as a learning tool. So if I want to learn about a topic, I can put it into Notebook LLM, I can read about it, but then I can listen to a little podcast about what it is, and it's a great little learning tool. So that's my latest sort of play tool.
Fab. Thanks, Andy. Maybe we'll hand over to you next, Laura.
So I'm Laura Powers with the Business Agility Institute, and we have been on a wild adventure, partially to understand how AI will influence how we conduct research and do the work of the organization. And the cool news is my two coworkers, Ahmed Sikki and Evan Laybourne, are like kids in a candy shop with playing with different technologies and seeing what they can do. And I think one of the things that we're really present to right now is just how amazing ChatGPT for us in particular right now is with qualitative data analysis for the work that we're doing. We're getting ready next week to put out our annual business agility report. And onerous work that used to be wading through, hundreds of comments and quotes and open text responses from organizations. Now we still do some of that work, but it's really nice to have this little friend at your side who helps to make sure that you haven't missed a theme, or maybe there's a better way to organize the information. So that's been good. The other thing is that, ChatGPT is a great icebreaker for us. We do some short trainings on what is business agility. And when in the past we've done icebreakers where we ask people to give us a wrong definition of business agility. And I think people are so tired of being on, video conferences now that sometimes it's crickets. You ask this question, you want to get the conversation going, and nobody wants to speak up. So now I say, well, my friend ChatGPT gave me a wrong definition of business agility. And their wrong definition is that business agility is when a CEO gets bored with their logo and their marketing approach, and they come up with something new and they pivot and adapt to this new thing. And so that's a literal response from ChatGPT, gets people laughing, and it's a great way to get started. So we're enjoying playing with it, and also are in awe of the amount of stuff that's coming out. I did a talk last week in Istanbul on prioritization, and I wanted to include like what are some of the options for using AI to help an organization prioritize their work, whether it's at the strategic level or at a more tactical level. And I stopped counting when I hit 70 different AI tools that you could use for prioritization.
Mm.
So I think that that's both a blessing and a huge problem for the organization or for the world, because there's too many choices for people to make a quick decision. And I can see Justin bubbling, so I'm going to hand it to him. He's got things to say.
Do I really? Is it that obvious? Containing myself, yeah, I'm excited. So my name's Justin Kabbani. I'm an AI implementation coach and founder of AI Marketing Summit. I really help business leaders go from that bit of like, oh, ChatGPT's cute. He wrote a nice poem about my dog, through to, okay, let's put this into practice in our business and get some ROI from it. Like one of the things that upsets me most a lot of the time when people hear about AI is they worry about this big future and how we're going to implement this and systems and blah, blah, blah. And they're overlooking this like immediate uplift they can have in their personal productivity. And it's not just productivity for productivity's sake. It's actually taking the worst part of their jobs and allowing them to elevate to the bit that they love the most, where they add the most value, and what they were hired to do, what they were born to do, right? So that's what I do. And talking about fun things, like I'm going to combine what the two of you just said, Laura and Andy, because talking about taking qualitative data of customer reviews and those sorts of things, and then Notebook LM, how cool that we can go and take all of our customer reviews for the last week and put that into Notebook LM, and then share a podcast out with our customer service team to say, here's a summary of, here's a podcast about all the summary of what's going on at the moment, right? There's just immediate practical implications. But if I can just share one story about something cool that happened with me with ChatGPT this week. So I call my ChatGPT Brainy One. It calls me Brainiac. It's a little thing we have going on. I was working with a client who is in FMCG business, and they wanted to get a list of all the competitive products in a particular segment from the supermarket. So first thing we did was we went to browse.ai and tried to use a robot to just scrape the data off that supermarket's website to pull out, product name, description, weight, country of origin, etc. And that supermarket might have had some anti-scraping technology on there so that we couldn't do that. So then I was like, okay, next, let's take a screenshot of that and put it into ChatGPT and ask it to read the screenshot. And what I got was this series of like, sorry, can't read it, not high enough resolution, OCR's not working, like a series of excuses. And I knew that the resolution was good enough. I knew that it could read it. So I started chunking it down into smaller bits, like 3 or 4 at a time. And it was still coming back with this error after error. And actually, this was a live coaching call. I had about 15 people on that call. And so I typed into my ChatGPT, you're really embarrassing me right now in front of a live audience. I want to show them what's possible. And hit enter, and boom, it did it. Right? So about this research about how we need to treat it like a human and give it feedback and all those sorts of things. But in saying that you're embarrassing me, like elicited a response that I couldn't get from, typical prompting.
Any other way?
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
That is very fascinating, and it makes me laugh because I just recently, for that same presentation, wanted to create an image in the style of a New Yorker magazine cartoon showing a Porsche in a traffic jam to make a point about if you don't have your priorities under control, you can have the best business that you can imagine, but you're stuck in a traffic jam. And the traffic jam I wanted was a bunch of sheep. Well, I never did find the correct prompt that would result in all of the sheep having heads. And I figured out that it was really, really important that it might distress the audience if 5 of the sheep were missing their heads. And I eventually gave up, took the best image that I could, and then went to Canva and cut out a sheep head and stuck it in. So it inspires creativity and precision in language, and then also the ability to know when to cut your losses and move on, I think. So
Sheep always have to come up in conversations between Aussies and Kiwis, right?
I feel like that's the case. Yeah. Yeah.
even when you're not planning it, the sheep just come to the party. So life is good.
It's the sheer number of them, you see.
No pun intended. That was bad.
Very good.
Interesting what you were saying about the number. I was looking at a LinkedIn post, and it was somebody who had done a beautiful infographic on 120 different AI apps, and I was quite surprised at the time. I'm, 120! I didn't realize there was that many. Next thing you know, I was reading another LinkedIn article, and it was like, oh, I've just reviewed over 1,000 apps, and I found 31 that are better than ChatGPT. Whether or not that was related to headless sheep or not, I'm not sure. And then I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to have a chat with my ChatGPT, because the latest thing that I'm doing is, I've personalized and customized the voice, and I just have chats and conversations with my ChatGPT now, and we have a verbal dialogue. And it turned around and said, no, I said, how many AI apps are there currently? Is there a way that you can calculate that? And it just turned around and said, oh no, there's thousands and thousands. And so I think that just sort of quantifies, it's no longer about ChatGPT and, a couple of other things that do, imagery and so forth. It's much broader than that. So interestingly, though, what you were saying about the human feedback, Justin, because I was wondering if, as part of our journey with AI, that we can't help in our approach to associate human characteristics to inanimate objects and treat everything, animals or cars or things, with that quality. And by what you're saying, it's almost suggesting that that's a good idea, and maybe we do need to give more human feedback to get the results.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's another nuance that I've noticed. Like, if you're uploading a big data set, let's say you got 65,000 lines in a CSV file you're uploading, sometimes ChatGPT will read the first 500 lines and go, oh, yeah, I know the rest. Or if you're uploading a big PDF, it might read the first few pages and assume it knows the rest, right? One of its great skills is pattern recognition and pattern completion. So it makes sense that it would do that. Also, if we understand the energy requirements, it would make sense that there's some built-in efficiencies. But also, maybe it's taking shortcuts like the humans that it's been trained on. And so when I'm uploading a reference document, one of my tips that I always give to people I'm working with is say, here is a data set. Please read this spreadsheet in its entirety from start to finish. Then take a deep breath and read it a second time in its entirety and let me know when you're done. And, by kind of being really specific with those nuances of language, you're making sure that it is actually absorbing every single cell in that spreadsheet, as opposed to, just a couple and then making some assumptions out of that.
How interesting. Just like our human brains trying to conserve energy, pattern recognition, biases, mental shortcuts, all those things apply by the sounds of it.
For sure.
And here I was thinking it was more like a teenager who was looking for the shortest way to goof off. Well, that's cool.
That too. I guess in age terms, that's probably about right.
Yeah.
On that shortcut thing, one other nuance, and sorry if I'm taking too much airtime here, cut me off if you need to, Bianca. But one of the nuances also that I noticed in the last couple of weeks is with advanced voice mode, just how it's changed the nature of like my use of the tool. So when I'm typing answers, I'm not a great typer, in spite of the fact that in the 90s, that's all we did at school in IT was touch typing. I still can't touch type. So I tend to give shortest possible answers and shortcuts of words and bad typing. Whereas when I'm in voice mode, I will keep explaining myself with 2 or 3 or 4 anecdotes until I feel like I've really explained what it is that I'm trying to say. And so therefore I'm giving a much richer input into the prompt and getting a much richer output.
Yeah. It's scary good, the quality of the conversations. I was actually tempted, and maybe I'll do this in a future session, to have ChatGPT as a panel member itself on the call, because it can interact that well, and holds a good dialogue.
Well, actually, with on that, you can HeyGen, which is a video app, have actually got that now, where you can, so they integrate ChatGPT voice, and you can have a conversation with either yourself or with one of its avatars through Zoom.
There you go.
It's pretty good. It's not
Yeah.
quite real time, but it's not bad. It's scary how it's getting.
Yeah, and quite engaging, and you end up listening more. So just like you were saying, because it's got this voice recognition now, you can you can add in all of the descriptions that you like without having to edit your text so much, and it can give you a really engaging answer back. Andy, maybe tell us a little bit more about the difference between, like, people use the terms AI, large language model, machine learning, and it all sounds like it's the same thing. But what's the nuances? Are all these things we're talking about true AI, or is it more this large language model? What does it all mean? Demystify it a little bit for us.
I guess that AI is the superset. So AI effectively is a system that's designed to mimic the way the human brain works and do some of the more complex work that a human brain would otherwise do. And then, that's been around for a long time, various forms of artificial intelligence, and that had sort of broken out into two main forms. Rules-based, which were effectively like smart spreadsheets, if then that. So that was the sort of earliest forms of AI, was really just quite simple, what we now call like programming. Then that sort of moved into more pattern recognition. And so that's been around for a while now. So we're probably used to, the Amazon recognition, or, provide you suggestions based on what you've bought before, or number recognition for license plates and that sort of stuff. So that sort of pattern recognition was what had, and that's otherwise known as machine learning. That sort of form of AI has been around again for quite some time now. And then more recently, we get into the concept of generative AI. So generative AI is less about predictions, but more about creation. So creating words for documents, but also images, video, sounds, music, but it's about generating things. So it's still a form of AI. It's still a part of machine learning. It's sort of that superset: AI, machine learning, generative AI. And then a form of generative AI is a large language model. So the large language model's purpose is about generating text. So it's based on, by its name, large volumes of text that's been put into a model to find the relationships between those words, and create very large statistical models that help predict this follows that. So when you put in a prompt, it basically predicts what words should follow from based on that prompt. So it's like it's like a very complex, expensive autocomplete. Think of it in that way. But that's a language model. But now when we think about ChatGPT, that's more than a language model, because now it has the ability for sound. We were talking before about generating sound. It can talk. It can generate images through the DALL-E. So these things are now blurring as well. So they combine a whole suite of machine learning capabilities, and that's what has made something like ChatGPT or Claude or some of these more general purpose generative AI tools so useful, because they generate something, and they're general purpose as well. So they're trained on a lot of different information. So rather than being like the old machine learning that was for a specific example. So it's trained to do something very specific, like provide a prediction on what book I might like to read, or these are general purpose. So they're designed to provide a range of different capabilities. So it's about generating, but it's also multi-purpose. That's what's made these tools so useful. But to get there requires huge investment in machines and in money. And so that's another thing that we didn't have the technology to be able to create them until quite recently. So it's like a lot of technology waves. It's a combination of things that enables this to be usable now that couldn't have done in the past. We didn't have fast enough processors, the GPUs that create these statistical patterns. We didn't have enough of them, or they weren't powerful enough to generate the models that were good enough to create these usable tools. So it's sort of, and this is, I think, a good example of exponentialism. So AI has been around for 40 years in various forms, but running at a very, in an exponential way. So we haven't really seen it a lot. We've seen little bits of it, and now we're bang onto the, the sharper end of that exponential curve. So we're in a wild ride.
Speaking of wild ride, I suppose every CEO's desire is to be able to keep the ship steady during a wild ride. So maybe we'll talk now about how and what should businesses be thinking about in terms of incorporating AI into their business strategy. And so I might start with you, Laura, on this from a business agility perspective. What's your thoughts around taking that approach in the business strategy? What should people be thinking about looking at?
Well, I I think that AI is going to be one of the great equalizers in business. It's going to shine a light into all of the closets in your business where the skeletons have been gathering dust for a long, long time that may come out to bite you. And by that I mean I've been taking some courses in AI. I live about a mile from Stanford, and there's a course that I'm in right now, taught by a guy who's at Cisco, and he was just talking about some models that they have built to help with customer service at Cisco. And he was like, and I can give you a detailed understanding of all of the deferred maintenance and tech debt that this part of Cisco has accrued over the decades, because now we have the ability to build models of using all of this data so that we can predict what the churn might be in customer service and how all of this fits together. And he's like, let me tell you, we've done such a poor job of being the custodians of this very valuable data that we have, that now we're paying the price in order to get the data to the place where we can actually use it. So I think that is one concept to think about. At BAI, we're very interested in the human aspects of artificial intelligence and how this work will integrate into and fit with the ways of working that are emerging and will continue to emerge. The big question that people have is, will AI take my job? And for some folks, the answer will be yes, but who knows when. And for most people, though, I think for some amount of time, it has the potential to significantly impact what you do and how you do it. And you can think of how it can help augment and accelerate what you do so that you do better work more quickly. And I think as a CEO, we need to be thinking about things like, how do we upskill and reskill our workforce so that people can stay up to date and in line with all of these opportunities that are coming. So anyone who has concerns about change capacity and ability to learn new things, that's going to be, I think, one of the limiting factors for people looking at, what's next in my career. I was reading some articles not too long ago that, said, caution, this article was published a year ago. And it used to be, you go, oh, something's only a year old.
But it's
That's nice
fresh.
and
Yeah.
it's fresh. But now it's almost like you need to put an expiration date on some of these pieces of research that are coming out because, if something's 3 months old, it's no longer really applicable. So we will be moving at a speed ongoing that is faster than any of us can, imagine, I think, right now. And it's going to be an issue. Now, that
Mm.
said, I also want to say that I think there's a question as to, um, how will this all play out for us? And I remember back in the day, my first job, I did not have a computer on my desk. There was a typing pool down the hall. And then eventually I got a terminal on my desk. And, time slowly became a personal computer, became a laptop, blah, blah, blah. But there was a major change. And at the end of the 1990s, I remember here in Silicon Valley, if you could spell internet, a VC would give you money. And in fact, there was one organization that had something they called a smell-o-vision, and it was an accessory for your computer that would actually emit odors related to whatever ad was being showed to you. And that was something that didn't survive that first internet bust at the turn of this century. And everybody now says, well, that's obvious. But I also remember back then, pets.com, everybody said, who in their right mind would order a 30-pound bag of dog chow to be physically shipped to their front doorstep? That's got to be the silliest business model ever. And it failed. But now we have Chewy and pets.com, and I'm sure there's
Yeah.
other stores like that. So what we have now, I think, is the tip of the iceberg, and how it evolves, who knows? But even 2 years from now, it's going to be drastically different. So need for speed.
It seems that in that need for speed, you touched on capacity. So one of the biggest changes is allowing more capacity for change. So obviously having the change skills to be able to implement change in your business is
Yes.
important, but carving enough capacity to be able to absorb the change and act on it is going to be critical by the sounds of it.
I have one little factoid I'd love to throw into the mix. I ran across a report that was published by McKinsey in June of 2024 that said that for every dollar an organization spends on developing an AI solution, they should be budgeting $3 for change management. And for comparison, they said for a digital transformation, a dollar developing your digital solution you should budget $1 for change management. So we're talking about a 3x increase in what does it take to get this thing out there. And so for people who are trying to figure out what's the future for the next chapter in their career, figuring out how to lead change and do it effectively in this kind of environment, I think is one of the opportunities that's just starting to bubble.
And so interesting because, we were talking about the number of tools. Having access to the tools is not the issue for organizations. It's how well you leverage them. So I guess that 3x is going to be, critical. Justin, you're having conversations with leaders around how they might use this in their business. Anything that you're picking up in terms of what leaders are worried about or thinking about in terms of implementing?
Yeah, I guess like first and foremost, when I'm working with any new client, I really always try and start to do that workshop with the CEO and executive team. And it can be as little as 1 hour, or it can be as big as one day, but we really need to like understand those mindsets from the top of the organization. And I sort of compare it to if a business was going to go expand into a new market. You wouldn't just hire a grad that spoke that local language and bring them into the business and think it's going to work. Right? You're going to take your leadership team and you're going to go and do a study tour and you're going to look at the competitors and you're going to immerse yourself in the market and all that kind of stuff. And then you'll come back and you'll make a decision about what you do. So that's the process that I take them through, is to say, like, understand what's possible now, today, that wasn't 2 years ago or even 6 months ago.
Yeah.
What's the minimum amount of technical knowledge that you need? Like maybe LLM, knowing what that is enough to get by, right? And a few other technical terms, and then set yourself up with Copilot or ChatGPT I have my priming, prompting, producing framework I take them through, and just start playing with it. The beauty of this technology, as compared to when I took people through getting their brands onto Facebook, or building their first iPhone app, or building their first website, is that you really can't break it. So fear that we have of new technology, it shouldn't really apply in this circumstance, because for the most part, we're interacting with it, and we can get a result without causing any flow-on effect. Now, I'm talking about, I guess, here, ChatGPT or Copilot, as opposed to if you're using it in your Salesforce or in your HubSpot or in your whatever other piece of software that has AI that comes into it. Just a couple of things to pick up, that expiry date type thing that we're dealing with now. One of the other tips I say is, like, personally, I pay for everything month to month. All of my, my credit card statement looks like it's got bullet holes all the way through it from all the different tools that I'm using. But like, even for me, like an annual fee on ChatGPT, I don't know who's going to be the leader in 12 months' time, or what's going to be at the top. Like, this is such a fast moving space. And I think that scares people. But on the other hand, I can say that the principles behind what I'm sharing and teaching now are pretty much the same as they were 18 months ago. So the real seismic shift probably happened when we got the access to ChatGPT, Copilot, went from enterprise level tool to consumer tool. And then all these other tools that have come since, and there's change and there's progress. I mean, Canvas in ChatGPT, we've got to talk about that. Wow. These things, they're like iterations, but more than being about learning tools, it's about learning mindsets. Because there's just, whilst it is trained on a human, there are some things where it's completely opposite to a human. So when we're working human to human, we think carefully about our feedback, because we want to keep our rapport, we want to keep that trust. So first round of feedback, we might give 80% of what we really want to say. If it doesn't hit the mark, we might only give 60% next time. Depending on who we're dealing with, we might land up in one of those feedback doom spirals. Yeah. Now, often what I see in workshops is people will put in a prompt, and then the result will come back and they go, it's not very good. Tell it it's not good. Tell it why it's not good. We can feel free to be ourselves and to speak our mind with these tools, and to really get through it. And not just 1 round, 2 rounds, 3 rounds, 20 rounds if you want. Do what you need to get to that output. So that's like a mindset shift between dealing with human versus dealing with AI that's really important to understand.
And that idea about the monthly subscription, because the technology is changing so fast, it does mean that we need to keep the topic of how we're using AI and what we're using and what's coming up and what's available now and new features being added has to be a regular conversation. Otherwise, we might as well go back to paying annually, because you're not really having that most recent conversation about what should you be leveraging now, because it's going to change so fast.
Yeah, definitely. It's not a tick box. It's not like, okay, we've done AI implementation.
Yay. Speaking of AI implementation, Andy, did you say earlier, part of your AI, you have an implementation team in your organization? What is the team? How does it operate? What's the things that you're tackling? Maybe we'll sit on that idea of implementation for a little bit longer.
Yeah, so we deliberately call it an acceleration team, AI acceleration team. So it's cross business. So we pick people across all parts of our organization. And we've got about 25 people, I think, who are interested and committed to developing their AI skills to effectively help facilitate the learning across the organization, but to help propagate it within their teams, and be like a champion type thing. So we often will have at least a couple of people from different parts of the organization to help them be able to sort of pair together and learn together and share. And then that sort of builds interest amongst the rest of their colleagues, and curiosity. And then we also, within that, we do policy development. So we've just rolled out an AI policy. And because we're a training organization, we're creating a learner policy as well. So we help develop that training as well. So part of our group is our learning and development team or capability team, and so we do a lot of work with them in curating learning programs, developing our internal learning programs. So I created a co-pilot training course that we rolled out. It was a live one, and then we've recorded that as a LinkedIn learning course, and then we curate a whole bunch of other courses. We've done things like I called the AI Apprentice. So we modeled it on the apprentice thing. We get people from departments to come together, and they form teams of 2 or 3, and then they get given a task that they have to do using AI, and then we award prizes and stuff. And that's a really cool, fun way of getting people doing things. And at the end of it, they're quite surprised about what they've been able to create, because you give them a whole list of things. Here's your idea. Now develop a solution from that. So that sort of gamify, make it fun type things. And I also do a lot of personal coaching, so working with the groups, often these pairs of people. Like, let's take an example and let's now apply that. And that's a whole across the board. Some really interesting things that we've been able to do in, across our organisation. But we had some massive gains in our qualification development group. So we develop formal qualifications in New Zealand, and we run programs. And so we've been able to use AI now for helping develop assessments and speed up the training development process significantly, by about 50%, which is obviously has a massive time advantage, cost advantage, and the other. This is where it's like the iron triangle, the old iron triangle in project management. AI can enable you to do all 3. That's the beauty of it. So we've been able to reduce the cost, save time, and increase quality as well, because that's the third attribute too. We've actually had better feedback from what we've been able to generate as well. So that trifecta is always something you strive for. That in some cases, I'm not saying all cases, but we've definitely seen the evidence that you can get that.
Speaking of tools, and maybe before I move further on that, it does seem that there's a common theme across each of you around the importance of play, of actually playing with it, using it in order for people to be able to learn, experiment, and be able to create new ways of working off the back of it. Talking about tools and things, Justin, from a marketing perspective, you founded, was it the first AI marketing summit that you had this year? Was this first or second?
Yeah, so we've done it in Melbourne once, in Sydney once, and we're doing it again tomorrow in Melbourne. Fast moving. It was going to be an annual thing, but we'll probably move to quarterly next year. Things are changing really fast. And look, that was really about, how can we learn it in the context of a singular discipline? So bring marketers together and say, let's not just learn ChatGPT and Copilot Mastery, but let's actually do that in the context of your job as a marketer, and let's break down every element of the marketing plan, for example. So a great SWOT analysis prompt, a great marketing objectives prompt, customer avatars, key messages, problems worth solving, every single element of that. And I think it's a great example of how, lots of organizations have a marketing plan and, all kinds of strategies across the business that might be done once a year and sort of sit on a shelf. Whereas now, with having great prompts, you can afford to update it once a quarter. Also, if companies have sub brands, some of our clients come in to do their master marketing plan, if you like, and then now they can do it for their 8, 9, 10 sub brands that they have as well. And the other part is that becomes an incredible priming tool to use in future conversations with ChatGPT or Copilot. So if you've gone to that extent of working out your exact marketing plan, you can feed that in before you go into content planning, before you go into advertising briefing, whatever it is.
So what are you seeing as the key benefits coming through? Is it just the efficiencies of that process, or is there other benefits that are coming through from using AI in the marketing space?
Look, I think the low-hanging fruit, and probably, if I was going to pick it, the number one use of ChatGPT would be in writing content, right? And maybe the world doesn't need more content. Maybe it does. I don't know. But there's just so much more to do with it when you go that level beyond content. And so taking it to that level of strategy where we see that as being maybe the domain of the brightest minds in the business, but we can see how it can play its role in accelerating us into the most important conversations that we're having around strategy, or making sure that strategy is consistently applied, or when we put our strategy on a page together, how we can communicate it out to each of the individual disciplines in the business, or each of the personality styles, or to put it into an auditory, a visual medium for people to consume, and to just look. One point I wanted to make earlier, actually, around the CEOs and stuff, is that, like, I have this thing that our most underutilized resource on this planet is the human brain, right? Even for us knowledge workers, even for us knowledge workers that get to spend 1 or 2 or 3 hours a day doing brain work, there's still a significant portion of our day where we're not. And then we think about people that are not in knowledge work profession, maybe even less time spent doing it. For me, the promise of what's here right now is how we can squash out some of that, like, non-brain time, and increase the amount of brain time. And each individual on the planet being 1%, 2% more creative, more so than productive, but creative, can solve some of these bigger societal challenges that we have, bigger business challenges that we have, and leave us feeling more fulfilled, because being creative and creating is fulfilling.
Way more fun than paperwork.
Yeah.
Way more.
Yeah. Maybe creative and connective. It gives us more time to connect, and in connection comes all sorts of great benefits for organizations. Nice. In terms of the future workforce, I just want to do a quick round table. And I guess my question is, what do you see as the big changes coming up in terms of organizations and their workforce? What things do people need to be thinking about front footing or changing? So maybe I'll start with yourself, Andy, and then we'll go through to you, Laura, and then Justin. And we'll kind of wrap up on this last question around key changes you feel are coming for the workforce.
Well, I guess the change management you mentioned before, but what I think practically what that looks like for us is a lot of encouragement of training and learning, encouraging people to use and do and grow, and experience, and with, I guess, embrace AI as a sort of partner, and in a way for them to be able to do new things, to learn new things, hopefully free up their time, as you mentioned before, to engage in more human productive discussions and creative work, as Justin mentioned. So I guess what you need to do is you need to get to that point where it becomes that second nature. I mean, people talk about AI first mentality, where that instinctively you can understand where you can be using AI for augmenting what you're doing, and that takes time and confidence and from doing. So that's how I see it, as organizations need to encourage more of that. I mean, not everyone's going to jump on board, but as many people as you can.
Thanks, Andy. Laura?
I think that folks need to think about what skills do they need. I think Andy really hit a really important piece in terms of learning agility, building learning organizations. How do you constantly figure out how to skill and reskill? And I loved one of the images I got from part of what you were talking about, Andy, is how we could bring pair programming or mobbing to working with ChatGPT, and have that be something where if I see how you put together a prompt and you and I, do some mobbing with Justin, we're all going to leave with, more creative ideas because of those interactions. And at the same time, I think that as leaders, we need to be thinking about trust issues and the psychology related to artificial intelligence. When I take a little tour through LinkedIn these days, there is already more crap than we need being published there, and AI, and there are people who are figuring out that I can just like generate more crap faster, and that's a misuse of artificial intelligence. And if you think, oh, I can just automate a whole bunch of stuff and it's just quantity over quality, I think that's a major issue. I also look forward to, I believe that we will reconnect with the importance of person to person interactions and the importance of in person events and conferences and things like that. Because for all I know, as personable as Andy has been through this whole session, is that really Andy Cooper there? And is that really Justin? Or am I talking to two avatars? And the only way I really know is if I can tickle them in person, and shake their hands and look them in the eye. And so I think we're going to see a resurgence in things that allow us to have those human interactions to balance some of these more isolated but extremely productive moments. So I'm excited. And one last idea is I believe that the day of the liberal arts major is upon us, because unless you are a data scientist or someone who's helping to build those models, the real artistry and the real value that can be created is someone who has the critical thinking skills and the creativity to say, well, what if we tried this thing and see what comes out. So there's lots of opportunities here.
That sounds like one of the best questions we can ask ourselves going forward is what if?
Mm-hmm.
Justin.
I love what both Andy and Laura are saying. It's really uplifting stuff. And I totally agree with Laura on that point that it's elevating the person-to-person communications. And in so many different ways, whether it be like when I write my monthly report, I can say, here's the Myers-Briggs or DISC profile or Clifton strengths of each of my team members. Please rewrite this report in the language that they're going to be able to hear and understand. Right?
Oh, nice.
So, there's one where it can increase the quality of our connection. And I also, we've just had the AFL Grand Final here in Melbourne a couple of weeks ago, and I just reminded how much we obsess over human capability and what one human can achieve. And I think, so to me, I think first AFL Grand Final between all AI teams, maybe people would show up. Second and third, I'm not entirely sure. And so that gives me this sense that I'm more interested not so much in the technology, but what humans are capable of when we harness the power of technology, and in elevating what we do. Because those of us, and particularly, we've all had a bit of career behind us, so we know what good looks like. So we can use these tools to accelerate towards good and to fill in the gaps where, I've only done this thing 3 times in my career, but I can't remember exactly this part of the process. Okay, well, ChatGPT or Copilot can take me through that little bit and accelerate me. That's good. But my real question, I think, around the workforce is around grads. Because a lot of graduate work I'm seeing in companies is now being done with AI tools. And when grads are being hired, there's that question being asked of, what are your AI skills like? And when you go on the other side of the conversation to grads at uni, they are being, well, not all unis, but a lot of them, it's cheap GPT, right? It's considered cheap to use these tools. So there's a real mindset shift. They've been doing it in secret, in private, and let's face it, maybe some of the academics are using it, maybe some of the marketers are using it in their marketing. Who knows? But there's this real rapid upskilling that needs to happen. Firstly, of grads, that they can go into these organizations with the skills that the organizations need. But the second question out of that for the workforce is if that first, second, third year work is being accelerated through or done by AI tools, how do we develop new team members to get that level of experience that we need them to have in order to get to that point of knowing what good looks like and to be able to use these tools to get there? And so maybe I predict that companies are going to have, to change that structure a little bit more, that rather than grads being left there and answering the questions, that maybe grads are more part of that collaborative approach in what they're doing to really accelerate them to a year 3 or 5 level of what they might be expecting in a company right now.
And they're digitally native, so they're much better equipped really to bring those skills into organizations than some of us who are still excited about one platform and can only use one platform, such as myself.
One's enough.
One's enough. Okay, I'm going to do a quick 1 minute around the room. Where do people find out more about you? Justin, we'll start with you and we'll work backwards through the order.
LinkedIn/in/Justin Kabbani. That's where you'll find out about me most, or justinkabbani.com, or the AImarketingsummit.com.au. Have a bunch of public workshops and seminars that I do, and also work directly with corporates, always responding to my LinkedIn messages. So that's probably the quickest spot to get me.
Thank you, Justin. Laura.
So on LinkedIn, I am /in/Laura M. Powers. And you can find me and Evan and Ahmed at businessagility.institute, and email is lpowers@businessagility.institute.
Fabulous. Thank you. Andy?
LinkedIn. And it's Andy766 Cooper, I think.
Fabulous. And we'll put the links in the
That's
description.
my computer name.
Nice.
So I've already become an Android.
So you might have been right, Laura, when you said you might need to just double check with Andy.
Yeah.
That was my glitch before, by the way, in the Matrix.
Thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciated having you on the podcast today. We'll put all those links, so if people want to follow you or learn more about you, they can do so in the description as well.